Hi there, my name is Olivia Craig and I work for Devon Mind. We are one of the partners on the PONToon project. We're based in the southwest of England and we have our HQ in Plymouth, and we function substantially as a mental health and wellbeing charity, supporting people with a wide range of mental health issues to recover and stay well. Today I want to talk to you about our work on the PONToon project, and namely the work we did to support our beneficiaries to be able to access the resources and the tools and the apps. And what I mean about supporting is around developing their self-confidence and their self-esteem to be able to take on the next challenge of engaging with the project. And we use a self-care and compassion approach, which is embedded across our practice generally, but worked really well for the PONToon project. So our beneficiaries had a wide range of mental health issues, everything from depression and generalized anxiety to PTSD and significant experience of trauma. They had been impacted by multiple negative life experiences, with many of these originating in childhood and what we now term as adverse childhood experiences. So issues potentially around abuse, neglect, lack of access to resources and poverty as well. We found that the women we worked with on the project initially had very low self-esteem, they had episodes of low mood and generally a feeling of worthlessness, which is not uncommon for people who experience significant mental health issues and have had significant trauma in their life. Many of the women had disrupted education, they had few formal qualifications, so their options in terms of employment were limited for many to precarious employment situations, 0-hour contracts with limited flexibility. But the really positive element was that this group of women were really motivated to seek help, which is why they came to us in the first place, and to try a new challenge which is specific to the PONToon project. Our approach across everything that we do is around supporting people to understand themselves, to build their self-esteem and confidence in a safe and non-judgmental way. And to do this, we use lived experience trainers. These are people who have had significant experience of their own mental health issues or life experiences or trauma, and are able to really work in a peer supportive way with the beneficiaries, which worked really well. But the main aim was to help beneficiaries to learn new techniques to manage their mental health, to enable them to progress onto PONToon resources and PONToon activities. So the course, Developing Self-Care and Compassion, is the vehicle, if you like, that we use to develop the self-esteem and the confidence of the women we work with, our beneficiaries. This could be run over 4 sessions or 4 weeks or 2 half days, and generally we worked as a consensus with the group to figure out which was best for them from the outset. The course is quite complex and it covers a lot over those 4 sessions or 2 half days, but for the purposes of this presentation it was more around understanding yourself, developing self-compassion, and then putting that self-compassion into practice. So it's really important to stress that the women we were working with had a wide range of mental health issues. So it's very important from the outset to put those measures in place that enable them to feel safe, to feel that they're in an environment in which they can share safely, and to be able to understand the importance of triggers. So a lot of the work we did in the course was through a fictional character called Sam, and Sam could be any gender. But rather than opening up lots of distress in the beneficiaries that we worked with, we asked them to share their experiences through Sam. So when they were asked to think about how Sam felt about coming onto this course, of course, naturally that they were talking about themselves, but it was safe. So it's really important to have a very robust group agreement from the very beginning, and always have a space where people can take time out if they need to. So I can't go into all the details around this course, but I wanted to pick up on where we started. And one of the main areas that's really important to get across to people from the outset is this idea of core beliefs. Now, all of the women in the groups that we work with had never really thought about this or came across this before, But every step of the way in the course is around raising self-awareness of who you are, developing your sense of self. So the idea of core beliefs and how we see the world and how those beliefs shape our behavior and our feelings was really, really important. And we did lots of activities around this, putting the women into different groups to talk about core beliefs, mapping out core beliefs, bringing those back to the main group. And that was a really powerful exercise, actually. And at this point, the majority of core beliefs were negative. Once we'd got the grounding around core beliefs, we then wanted to move on to what is a fundamental element in CBT, and in fact in any sort of change around yourself, is the whole idea of this cycle, how thoughts create feelings, which create behaviours, which reinforce thoughts. For want of a better word, in many of the situations these beneficiaries encountered, this was a very, very negative, vicious cycle. Again, we did a lot of work around what are those thoughts that Sam might have, positive or negative, and how those thoughts then might impact on Sam's feelings to then impact on Sam's actions. We had body maps. We asked people to map out where those feelings might appear in the body and the impact that they had, and how this cycle reinvented itself over and over again. We spent quite a significant amount of time on this, because alongside the core beliefs, this was a really important next step. I put this one in because it was actually really, really important to the groups. The idea that there was more than one way of thinking, that these thinking traps, as we call them, all of us fall into them at any one moment in time without ever realizing what they are. So we went through the thinking traps, we talked a lot about them, we asked the group to come up with scenarios for Sam, and at which point these thinking styles might impact on Sam, and then bring that back to the cycle, thoughts, feelings, behaviours, and then back again to core beliefs. So reinforcing all the time with our beneficiaries this real understanding of themselves, getting to know themselves and how they actually tick, if you like. So the really important part, the first half of this course, was around developing that self-awareness, around helping the beneficiaries to think more critically in a positive way, not to become very introspective, but actually just to really understand what motivated them and what the drivers were in their life. The next stage we moved on to was around developing self-compassion. And this was where we turned that self-awareness into action, so that people could actually practice a self-belief and a self-compassion that would impact on the choices that they would make and on how they felt. Now, self-compassion is a very alien concept, and nobody in any of the groups had come across this idea of self-compassion. Some from the outset thought it was quite preposterous. Touchy-feely is what one of the ladies mentioned to us. But once we talked about self-compassion in terms of the impact it has, and it's not about me, but it's about the impact this can have on a person's life in terms of their outcomes, people began to open up a lot more and talk about their own lack of self-compassion, which was very, very evident. So we did a really big piece of work around what self-compassion means, how you can be more self-compassionate, not striving for perfection, but striving for that balance in between. At the core of self-compassion, the group began to realise is the simple idea of being kind to yourself, freeing yourself from those negative thinking cycles, those core beliefs, those thoughts, those actions, those feelings and behaviours, to actually have a kinder impression of yourself, open yourself up to connections with other people, to realise that you are part of a shared human experience. And that self-kindness, once it's engendered and it's developed, is something that needs to be practiced over and over again, so it's embedded. And we began to see a much more openness come through from the group when we began to talk about this. There was resistance in the beginning around the idea that you had to be kind to yourself, because it was linked to those feelings of worthlessness. So those two go hand in hand. How can I be kind to myself? I don't matter. So we did a lot of mapping on that. We did some role play. We brought in a guest speaker from another part of our organisation to talk about this, and it was a really impactful part of the session. We then moved on to mindful self-compassion, because at this point we discussed self-awareness, we had discussed how important self-compassion was, but we wanted to make sure that the beneficiaries had the tools to ensure that self-compassion was an ongoing resource for them. So at this point we were introducing mindfulness, and we introduced the concept of mindful self-compassion and how you could achieve that through mindfulness activities and a state of being. Again, mindfulness, most of the group had heard of it but hadn't really thought about it. Some had become aware of it because their children in school had sessions on it. Many of them thought it was just a load of mumbo jumbo. So it was really important to set the scene that mindfulness is a very well-known concept, and when it works it can be really powerful. We're lucky in the organisation in that we have a very experienced mindfulness-based stress reduction practitioner who came in and delivered a session on mindfulness to the group. How to practice mindfulness, the different mindfulness techniques. We did chocolate mindfulness followed by visualization mindfulness. Some of the women found it quite difficult to settle into, but we found that once they got the hang of it, we thought that it was something that they could practice wherever they went. We gave each of the beneficiaries, the women, we gave them a grounding stone, which was basically a polished pebble, which they kept in their bag or in their pocket. At any point in time they could ground themselves if they were stressed, and they could practice even 30 seconds of mindfulness. We also talked a lot about the benefits of mindfulness and how it could give people the space to think, to quieten their mind, to practice that self-compassion that's so important, and to maintain that self-awareness, that they'd opened up this idea of who they were going to be kinder to themselves, and they had a tool to practice to keep them grounded, to manage their mental health issues, and to enable them to stay well for longer, which in turn motivated them to try something new. And at this point we were able to sign quite a few of the women up to join our app testing groups and our other groups. In particular, we ran a course for a group of women around setting up your own business on eBay, and 80% of the women in that group came through the self-care and compassion course, and they said they found it a really powerful first step. We also wanted to do something that the group could take away, or the beneficiaries individually could take away, which was a formulation plan. The power of a very simple formulation in enabling people to practice self-compassion and enable them to manage those triggers was really, really important. So we did some formulation work with the group, but also helped them to think about that self-awareness and again the self-compassion. So that was really, really an important part of the session that we did also. So I've just given you a real snapshot of what we did in the self-care and compassion course, which was 4 sessions long over 4 weeks, or over 2 half days. And in the full training course there is a lot of material covered. There is a lot of material to take in. So after the course, about a month after the course is finished, we have what's called a course drop-in. We run these for all of our courses, so on any particular day that's set in that month, anybody who's been on any course can come and join that course group. So for self-care and compassion, I led the first drop-in session, and we had a number of the women turn up just to share how they'd use the tools and techniques that they had picked up on the course, which was really, really good to see. So that's it from me. As I said, this is just a snapshot. If you have any questions at all, or you want to find out more about the course, or more about what we do at Devon Mind, or our participation in the PONToon project, please do send me an email. My email address is here, and I will be happy to get back to you. Thank you, and enjoy the symposium.